You're listening to The Donor Doctor Show, where your host, James Newberry, will help you improve the health of your fundraising. Now over to James.
Hello, this is The Donor Doctor, and I have a special treat for you today. I have one of my heroes, the guy I would most admire, because he's a fundraising copywriter who's made the transition to commercial copywriter, so they respect you too. This is somebody who's thought of as one of the living legends. Richard Armstrong, it's very good to have you as a guest today.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Jim. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, thank you so much. Now, you're an author, a speechwriter, a teacher, but you found that copywriting was the most lucrative. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think if you're going to be, if you've decided that you want to be a writer, it's probably the best way to get to be paid well and to be paid consistently. I have written books, including one novel, but it's funny. I met a best-selling novelist once who put this, and he was also in the advertising business, and he did not give up his advertising job. And I asked him why, and he said, "Well, you can make $1 million writing a novel, but you can't make a living at it."
That's funny.
I think that puts it pretty well. I mean, you can make a lot of money writing books, but it's not a very good way to consistently make a good money over a long period of time, and copywriting really is.
Right.
And yeah, I have worked in other areas of what you might call commercial or business writing. You mentioned speech writing. I enjoyed that quite a bit. It's very, very engaging work. It's the kind of writing where you can really kind of let out all the stops and try to write in a very elegant, sophisticated way. You can use humor. You can use drama. There's a lot to like about it. But except at the very, very highest levels, it does not pay as well as direct mail copywriting does. And in fact, I really can't think of another area of commercial writing that does.
Yeah, I think with speech writing, you don't have the residuals. You can write a letter. A friend of mine, Stuart McLean, who has kind of a similar background, and he used to work for Phillips Publishing too. So
right, I know Stuart. I've met Stuart
as well. Yeah, and so he has that similarity. But he's left the agency I work for. 10 years ago, and we're still mailing some of his letters. To give you an idea. And a speech, you don't have that, so that's an
No, you don't, and just the flat fees are lower as well. I mean, it's been a while since I've worked as a speechwriter, but I know back in the when I was working a lot as a speechwriter, it was in the 80s, and I knew that I would get paid something along the lines of $2,000 or $3,000 for a speech, and I knew that the very best people with White House experience and that sort of thing could get maybe somewhere between 5 and 10. But at the same time, top direct mail writers were getting paid a lot more than that, and I assume that's still the case today. I kind of suspect that speech writing may have leveled out at a certain point, whereas in copywriting, particularly as you mentioned, if you do have some kind of a royalty arrangement, you don't always, obviously, but if you do, then the sky can be the limit.
Right. Now, you wrote my first 40 years in junk mail, and I encourage everybody to go online and read it. It's witty. It's easy to read. There's a book. I'm sure you've read Robert Collier's letter book.
Yes, it's not the easiest read in the world, but I've.
Well, that was my point. Is it's tedious. It's very informative. You learn a lot, but it's tedious. Yours is fun to read, and so I would encourage everybody to go on there and read these letters. Now, you started in the RNC mailroom, which is actually a good start because you're getting to read the comment mail, and is that right?
Yeah, I think probably the best place to start if you wanted to be, if you really, set out very early in your life to become a direct mail copywriter. Not that many people do, although you're seeing more and more of it.
Yeah,
nowadays.
That's true.
But if you really said, gee, what is the best possible way I could get to become a direct mail copywriter? I would recommend that you get a job as a salesperson. And probably the worst job you could find would be the better. And by worst, I mean selling something like Bibles or encyclopedias door to door, or magazine subscriptions. Get the door slammed in your face 1,000 times. Gradually learn what it takes to open up a conversation with somebody. Gradually learn how to get from the door to be invited into the living room to give your spiel. And learn where the areas of resistance are, when that housewife, if it is a housewife, when she's starting to get bored with you, when she's starting to get resistant to the things you're saying and asking, sort of negative questions, what you might call objections, how to overcome those objections, and then most importantly, how to close the sale, how to get from that kind of long conversation and demonstration to the point where she actually sits down and writes a check. It reminds me of that great scene in Glengarry Glen Ross when Alec Baldwin comes out and that movie where he comes out.
Yeah, it's a great movie for sales.
Salesman. Yeah, and he's one of the salesmen, I think it was Jack Lemmon, goes to get a cup of coffee and Alec Baldwin says, "No, coffee is for closers." Because that's really the hard part. That's where the rubber meets the road. It's the like in a bullfight, they call that moment when the sword comes out. Up until then, it's pretty much fun and games. Maybe the bull doesn't enjoy it all that much, but it's fun and games for the matador and for the banderias and for the audience. But when that sword comes out, then somebody's going to die. It's either going to be the bull usually, but it could be the matador.
That's right.
And so they call it the moment of truth. And in the direct mail business, that's when you ask for the money. So I guess this is a long way of saying that if I really wanted to start from a standing start and learn how to be a copywriter, I would spend a few years or at least a year working as a door-to-door salesman. Then I would probably go to a direct mail agency like the one that you work for. And because the great thing about an agency is that it gives you lots and lots of experience in a short amount of time. I mean, when I was working for an agency, and that's how I got started, well, it was kind of my second job in the business, was working for an agency. And, we were literally writing one package in the morning and one in the afternoon. Of course, they were a lot smaller back then, and they were less elaborate than they are now. But you get a tremendous amount of experience in a short amount of time, and you also learned about all the other things that go into the business, not just the writing. Nowadays, we're training an awful lot of copywriters, but it's kind of interesting and somewhat disheartening to find out how little they know about the rest of the business. They know nothing about list selection or production, and they probably wouldn't be able to tell you, for example, what a letter shop is and what a letter shop does. They know nothing about
I had a guy almost a year, he didn't know what a multi was. So
a multi
give you an idea.
Yeah.
I wasn't. It was amazing to me. I was disappointed, to say the least.
Yeah.
Now I was going through your book. Your first letter was for Governor Thompson of Illinois, or Jim Thompson. He's running for governor, and he was just a one-page letter with no P.S. But good short paragraphs and a devil, the Cook County machine. And then
probably a mistake on my part to not have a postscript.
Not have a P.S.
I probably
they usually say you should.
Rule. That's right. If I had it to do over, I would put that on.
Well, you'd have made it longer too, probably.
I would, and now I think that's the kind of main lesson that I took, that you can take from that, is back in the 70s, or I guess I would have written that around 76 or something like that, and we literally thought that you should not go over to the back page. We thought you should just write a one-page letter, one side of one sheet. And, at some point, somebody probably by mistake went over to the to the back page and saw that it worked
better. And it did better.
Yeah. And then we saw, suddenly two worked better than one, and 4 worked better than 2, and 6 worked better than 4, and 8 worked better than 6, to the point where nowadays, I've written promotions that were 80 pages long, and I don't see any end in sight. Yeah. People
it's interesting.
People think, for example, that the internet is a short copy medium.
Right. That's an example.
Yeah.
Somebody said
but
that,
in fact,
and everybody takes it as gospel.
Yeah.
Yeah, people take certain things as gospel without testing them.
Exactly. And when people first started writing for the web, they made this point over and over again. You're only one click away from losing your customer, so it has to be short. Well, it turns out what's happened now, I'm writing promotions that a lot of times they're video sales letters now, and I'm writing one right now that is the contract says it's got to be at least 10,000 words long.
Wow.
So that's what
you have.
There's no end in sight.
There's another rule that people say that you shouldn't use humor in copy, but I thought your Dick Celeste letter was funny. It was used a tax form and put all your earnings down and double it and send it in.
Exactly,
that was one of your early.
Yeah, and that is a rule that I had a mentor once who said that you shouldn't use humor because there's no more serious operation in the world than separating a man from his money.
Is that Milt Pierce?
It is. It was Milt Pierce, yeah. But
okay.
I have from time to time, I think it's appropriate. For example, I do a lot of work in the publishing field. And if you're selling a magazine where an important component of that magazine is the sense of humor of the magazine, well, it seems to me it's a no-brainer that the direct mail piece should be somewhat humorous as well.
I thought your American Spectator magazine offer, was funny.
Yeah, that's a perfect example.
It fit I subscribed to that magazine. It fit the reader. The reader would like that. That they would get it.
The magazine was. I thought that was conservative. I'm sure if you're a liberal, the magazine probably gives you fits. But if you're a conservative, you find it very amusing, very funny, very enjoyable. And I just, I figure you've got to some extent, you've got to capture that in the promotion. I know somebody once wrote a promotion for, I can't remember this guy's name, but he wrote a promotion for Spy magazine, which was also a very funny magazine, and his was a hilarious promotion too. I can't see how you could not do that. And I guess maybe
I agree. I thought it worked. Yeah.
And I guess with the Dick Celeste thing, that was going out on the edge a little bit, but it did make some money, and it certainly got attention.
Oh yeah, I like that. I think there's two of yours letters I really like best, and I think one's going to surprise you. One won't. The Sea Turtle mailing, which you got a lot of awards for, was clever. It seems obvious afterwards, but can you talk about that mailing a little bit?
Well, the Sea Turtle, it really was handed to me on a plate because the client, this was through an agency, and between the client and the agency, they worked out a lot of the really good stuff about it. For example, they knew that they wanted to talk about a specific point about their work in terms of saving sea turtles, and they knew exactly how they wanted to do it, which is that when sea turtles are first hatched on the beach, they have an instinctive or they have an instinct to head towards the light, because in a primordial situation where there's nothing else there, generally the sky over the ocean will be somewhat lighter than the sky over the land. So over millions of years of evolution, baby sea turtles have been born with an instinct to go towards the light. So, but if there's a motel or something like that behind them that's flashing a neon sign that says no vacancy on it, the sea turtles get confused and they go in the wrong direction. And if they go in the wrong direction,
you had all sorts of drawings,
yeah, they're just going to die, So we knew that. We knew that we were going to focus on that. None of that was my idea. That all came to me from the client.
But it was it was a really acute mailing, because you'd see the sea turtle go in all sorts of in a zigzag direction throughout the letter.
Exactly. That was
I'd
my
never
main
seen that before.
That was my main.
Well, that was a huge contribution.
I told the story. It was a good story to tell. And I told it very simply and very dramatically. And the other thing that I came up with is, I thought, well, why don't we draw some sea turtles on the page and then show one of them straying off in the wrong direction, and he actually you can see his footsteps as he goes down the page, and he goes around one of the subheads, and he goes down to the next page, and so on and so forth, till he reaches.
That was very clever.
Page.
That was
yeah.
I mean, that made the letter. Yeah.
Yeah,
very
it was
good.
almost. It was what with the story and the illustration. It was almost more like watching a movie than it was reading a letter. And I think that's what made it so effective. But like I said, a lot of it was just kind of handed to me on a silver platter. It was a simple problem. It was a problem that the idea was that we would use their contribution to buy newspaper ads in Florida, informing everybody in Florida that they should turn off their lights at night if they're near the beach. That was a simple solution to the problem. So people really got the feeling, well, gee, if I send in $10, $15, $25, I can really help out and really make a difference here. So all of that came to me through the client and through the agency. And that's why, I sometimes advise young copywriters to not get into an adversarial relationship with their clients, because clients are not idiots. And they know their business better than you do in most cases, and it's not unheard of for them to come up with a great idea. And if they do, and you recognize it, then all the copywriter's job at that point is not to screw it up too badly.
Yeah. There was one other one I really liked, and it's going to surprise you, is the Maserati ad. I thought it was like a brilliant use of flattery. You remember that one?
Oh, absolutely. You're going way back into the distant past there.
I really thought that reminded me. A couple weeks ago, I did one on St. Paul's Book of Philemon, how he uses flattery to get this slaveholder to let his slave go. And it reminded me of the flattery there. Different, of course, but it was so clever, because you really made the people feel like it was like most people don't know Maseratis. I imagine most people getting your letter do, actually, but it made you feel exclusive, but not like in a. I don't know. It was very clever. You have to read it. It was brilliant, line by line.
Well, when you think of it, it is a really very, very exclusive group, and it is even among wealthy people, it's exclusive, because just like most wealthy people will buy Rolexes, they're not aware of the fact that there are much better. Yeah. There are much better watches out there. They just don't know, and so when you're writing on behalf of Maserati, you're dealing with people who might very well own a Rolls Royce or a Mercedes Benz or something that's quite famous, and particularly since we were not talking about the Maserati sports car, we're talking about a Maserati sedan. So I think the letter started out saying that it was very difficult to find you. But we're glad that we did. And, in a way, it was sort of reminiscent of that famous opening line that Ed McClain wrote for Newsweek years ago that started out, if the list on which I found your name is any indication, this will not be the first, nor will it be the last solicitation you receive. One of the great first lines in history. And mine was kind of, I don't know if I was familiar with Ed's line at that point, but it was certainly the same kind of psychological dynamic at work there.
Right. No, it's clever. Again, you can just go online. He's giving his information away for free. Go online. You got to read this. It's much easier to read than Robert Collier's letter book for sure. I can tell you that. Now, one of the things that's interesting, everybody in the business talks about the importance of you. Some people even say you should have 2.5 U's for every I. I've heard formulas like that, believe it or not. They give half points for yours and stuff. But you believe in I because you're telling a story. And, of course, in two of the letters in your book, you have the American Spectator magazine, which was witty, and it was a unique PS, which I noticed there. It was not a reiteration, as most postscripts are a reiteration of the offer. You had something to appeal to liberals because, you get advantage. And then later, for a commercial, you did the Sam RV letter.
Yeah, right.
And you signed it for that, too.
Yeah.
And that was a big mailing
when it comes to the word you, you get an awful lot of advice out there to use the word you a lot. And in fact, no less an authority than John Cable's once said you should keep hammering away at the reader with you. And I don't want to disagree with that. I don't disagree with that, and I don't want to warn people away from it. I just feel that sometimes people go overboard and they like to eliminate that first-person voice entirely, and I think that's a mistake because one of the things that makes direct mail a strong advertising medium is that it's personal. And when you're working in advertising, I think you should always work to the strength of whatever medium you're in. Like if you're in television, for example, you want to do something that's very visual. You want to do a lot of demonstration, for example, because that works to the strength of the medium. And in my opinion, in direct mail, the strength of the medium is that it's personal. There's hardly anything in the world more personal than a letter. And I think what makes a letter seem personal is that very strong sense that you get when you read a personal letter that you're in the presence of the person who wrote it. You can almost hear that person talking to you. And when you think about the personal mail that you get, whether it's from your mother or your girlfriend or your grandmother or whatever, that's the quality that makes it seem you can hear that person talking to you. And in fact, those letters don't go you. They always say, well, last night I did this, and last week this happened, and your father and I did this the other day, and so on and so forth. If anything, they're really all about them. So I think what I like to do is just make the reader feel that this letter, that somebody actually sat down and wrote this letter, and that they had you in mind, and that they're a real person, and that they're talking to you just like they would talk to you if they were sitting right across from you. I try to get that feeling in my copy, and I think it's hard to do that if you eliminate the first person singular. You know what I mean?
Right. I think I agree with you.
If you do want to go through and eliminate something, eliminate the word we, because we has no place in direct mail whatsoever. Because letters are never written by two or more people, so we is just a terrible word. But having a letter that's filled with you and filled with I, that's what makes a letter a letter.
Well, I met you when I attended a lecture that you gave at Falls Church for the DMAW. I don't know, maybe a dozen years ago. Yeah. And you brought up something I'd heard of before, the unique selling proposition. Of course, that was originated, I believe, by Rosser Reeves.
Exactly.
But you gave the example of Yellow Page ads, which I guess I don't know if they still exist, but
really.
Like if you were an acupuncturist, you would talk about back pain. You would just go for that market. You wouldn't go for, I don't know, neck pain or sinus relief. There are actually people who do that for, that was, most people want to put everything in there.
Any of those things would be good as long as you selected one of them. The problem is that they want to run ads in which they talk about all of them, and you do have to have a unique selling proposition. This is a problem with clients and their approach to marketing is that they want to be all things to all people. But the key to success in marketing is to narrow your market as much as possible and then penetrate it very deeply, because you often get more by going deep into a narrow niche than you would if you tried to grab the whole thing. And an analogy that I use very often to explain this is, let's say that you were a publisher and you have two manuscripts in front of you, and both manuscripts are about breastfeeding. And one of them is a big, huge, long, 1,000-page manuscript that's called the Encyclopedia of Breastfeeding. And the target market is every woman in the world who's thinking about breastfeeding, any woman who's pregnant or who has a pregnant daughter or whatever. And it talks about the history of breastfeeding and the health benefits of breastfeeding, and it just covers everything, okay? And then the other manuscript is called, let's say, Breastfeeding for Working Women over 30. Now, which one of those has a potential to be a bestseller? In my opinion, it's going to be the second one, because you've narrowed down your market and you're going to sell more.
You could say that book's for me. Yeah, you could.
Yeah, exactly. That's what that person is going to think. They're going to see those two books on the bookshelf, and they're going to think, oh, the one is big, and I don't know, I don't know if there's what's there for me or not. The other one's going to go, wait, I'm over 30. I work. I'm thinking about spreads. This is for me. So
this is me.
And you know what's interesting is that clients understand that when you explain it to them, so they understand it in a theoretical sense. But when they actually make decisions about their own company and about their own marketing strategy, and when they're evaluating the copy that you submit to them, they always err on the side of the larger market. I mean, they always think, well, we don't want to we don't want to close the door on anybody. We want to make sure that so it's a fight that has to be fought over and over and over again. Another analogy that I use sometimes when I'm having this argument with clients, and you have it all the time. I mean, I've had this argument hundreds of times. But suppose you're in the business of selling adult diapers, let's say, and you know that your demographic is people over the age of 65. And obviously there's some people who, medical reasons or whatever, might use adult diapers when they're much younger than that. But the vast majority of your customers are over 65. But I guarantee you, Jim, somewhere in this country right now, they're at an adult diaper company, there's some young guy with an MBA who's giving a PowerPoint presentation to his bosses, and he's saying something along the lines of, we could sell so many more adult diapers if we would just concentrate on people who are in their 20s and 30s. Because there's so much more of them,
you know what? You're probably telling the truth. I've heard that truth.
Yeah. I mean, they all think like that.
That's right. They all do. One other thing from your lecture that I came away from was on teasers. And you said something, and of course there's a debate about whether you're better and obviously the kind of teaser you have matters. But I found it interesting, and then I came back and told my friend Stuart, and he says, yeah, but my teaser's okay. He said he agreed that most people would be better off putting fewer teasers or not putting a teaser on there. But it's interesting in your book, and what I really found helpful was you shared your failures as well. And it even seemed from the examples you gave that your teasers often backfired. For instance, one I liked, You May Unleash a Powerful Spirit for the National Museum of the American Indian. You tested it did better without it.
That kills me to this day, because it was such a great line, and it fits so beautifully with what we did on the inside of the envelope. I mean, just when you went from there to the letter, it was a great connection. And but my client at the time, she said, well, let's just test a blank envelope, because that's a normal test that you sort of do. And I said, that'll never work. But of course it won. But the funny thing about that is that she wanted to enter it into the DMAW's awards. What are they called? The Maxi Awards. And I said to her, look, when you submit this for an award, don't submit the blank envelope. Submit the one with the teaser, because
they're more likely to like. Yeah.
Right. It kind of illustrates the difference between what works in the mail versus what works in an award ceremony. But yeah, we find all the time that blank envelopes work better or very,
well, it looks more personal. Going back to what you're saying, personal, right?
Exactly. Now that doesn't mean I'm
so it doesn't surprise me.
It doesn't mean that I'm going to stop writing them, because there are many occasions when the envelope with the teaser will work better. And in fact, I used to refer to this very question as the Halbert versus Hatch controversy, because Gary Halbert believed in the A pile, B pile theory, which is that if your life depended on it, if your life depended on getting an envelope opened, you should make it look as much like personal mail as possible. It should have a live stamp on it. It should have a typewritten address, and no teaser. Should look exactly like something that you might get from, a business or even from a family member or what have you, handwritten if possible. The more you can make it look personal, the better it would be. Now, Denny Hatch, who ran Who's Mailing What, is now called Inside Direct Mail, and one of the newsletter, the idea behind the newsletter is that they would go through 5,000 pieces of direct mail every month and try to pick out the most interesting ones, and they would also track the ones that they saw over and over again, because those would be the controls. So it was a very valuable newsletter to get, and it still is. And they kept an archive too, so you could request things. But so all this is to say that nobody knew more about what was working in the mail than Denny Hatch did, and nobody kept closer tabs on it than Denny Hatch did. And Denny Hatch said that in his experience, direct mail pieces that did have teasers on them, in many cases blaring, obvious direct mail advertising teasers, tended to outpull or at least be more common as controls than the Gary Halbert method. So it's kind of interesting, and in a way they're both right. It depends on what you're doing. And the way I look at it, for example, is that if you know, for example, that you've got a golf product and you're writing to a golf list, there's no point, as far as I'm concerned, in writing to that list with the Gary Halbert approach.
I agree. You want to flag your donors down. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
You golf enthusiasts. Yeah.
If the guy is a golf nut and he sees that he can get, this had just happened to me the other day because I'm a golfer myself, and I got an envelope that said, "We will send you 10 brand new gloves for $5," and it was out on the envelope, and I went, "Shit, I can't turn that down." So I not only opened it, I bought it. I bought it immediately because I wasn't going to get a better deal than that. So I didn't need to be tricked into opening the envelope. They could sell me right out on the envelope. So it really kind of depends on what situation you're in. And
you had some winners too.
I've had winners with both, but somebody who's you're talking about Robert Collier, for example. One of the great books in advertising or in direct mail is Breakthrough Advertising by Gene Schwartz.
Oh, Gene Schwartz, yeah.
He goes into great detail about this very question, about how deep should you sell, and you've got to first take a really close look at how familiar your customer is with your product or your company, and it kind of ranges all the way from somebody who not only doesn't know you, but they don't know your company and they never heard your product before, and your product is designed to solve a problem that they don't even know that they have, okay? That's as cold as you can get.
Right.
And you go all the way from that to somebody like me who's already a golfer, who already goes through golf gloves like every week or so, and you just need to make me a good offer. That's on the other end of the spectrum.
Right.
So, the Halbert approach is going to work well on the first side of that spectrum, whereas the Hatch approach is going to work better on the other side of the spectrum. And as a copywriter, you got to sit down and think very carefully where on that spectrum you are, because if you misjudge that, you're going to have a terrible bomb.
Right. Well, I'll tell you what, I appreciate you taking time. I took longer than I said I would, so I apologize for that, but I just have one question.
I could talk for hours.
What advice? Oh, good. It seems like you're enjoying it. What advice would you give? Because, podcast people are young, mostly. What would you advise? You told them to get into sales, but what would you like to know, if you'd have known like 20, 30 years ago would have been nice?
Well, we have so much great copywriting education nowadays, and when I was young, we really had none. I mean, even though I was working at an agency, even the people at the agency, we were a young agency that had just gotten started, and we were all kind of learning by doing. And the only real instruction we ever got was just reading some of the old books. You mentioned Collier. We had that. We had Claude Hopkins. We had Maxwell Sackheim's book and Vic Schwab's book, and I spent hours learning from them. Nowadays, you've got a lot of copywriting coaches out there. You've got a lot of people who are offering copywriting courses. The organization down in Florida, AWAI, I think is an excellent
you spoke there. There's a YouTube video. You spoke you were Man of the Year there.
I'm a big believer in them. I think they're great, and they offer a whole variety of different courses that they'll sell you on all different kinds of niches and how to break into copywriting and everything. And so there's a wealth of opportunity there. I think the one big regret, two regrets. One is that I didn't go take the salesman route that I just described to you. I should have done that. I should have had some real sales experience. And the other is that I probably should have hooked up with a real mentor at some point. And I kind of got a little close to that with Milt Pierce, although we didn't have a one-on-one mentoring.
He was your
experience.
Teacher.
He was a teacher, and he was a friend. And then I had a couple of clients. I would say, I'll mention them by name, particularly Kay Lautman of Lautman Associates, and Don Smith of Belvoir Publications, one on the fundraising side and the other on the newsletter business side. And both of them were frankly better writers than I was, and they knew an awful lot about the business, and I just learned an awful lot learning from them. I mean, I learned a lot by working for them. They just taught me so much by editing my work and helping me develop as a writer and teaching me about the business as well. But nowadays, I look at some of the people who I think are doing some of the best work out there, people like Paris Lampropoulos, David Deutsch, Carlene Anglade Cole, and there are a few others. And in each case, they specifically sought out somebody who would serve as kind of a copy chief or a mentor to them. And they in some cases, like with David, I think he put himself in an indentured servitude position with Jim Rutz, for example, just to learn everything that he had to teach him. And I kind of wish I'd done that when I was younger too, because by the time I got to be 30 or so, I on the plus side I'd had a lot of experience, but on the downside it wasn't all good experiences. Kind of to go back to golf, it's one thing to practice, but it's got to be good practice. It can't be bad practice. Right.
You're learning bad habits.
Yeah, you're just sort of reinforcing your bad habits, and I think I did that a lot. And even to this day, I'm now 65 years old, and I'm still struggling with some things that I really should have mastered 40 years ago, and I didn't. And so I think I would advise young people to find somebody who's really, really good at this. And particularly if they're, working in the area that you want to work in, whether it's financial newsletters or health supplements or fundraising, whatever. find somebody who's really, really good, and just go say, look, I'll go carry coffee for you or do your photocopying for you. I just want to hang around and watch you do what you do, and you don't have to pay me a dime. I think that I think that would be a very valuable experience, and I kind of wish I did it, because there were a couple of people that I knew back when I was in my 20s that would have been. I mean, for example, if I'd gone and applied for a job for Richard Vigri instead of at the agency where I was at, because the Vigri company, they really knew what they were doing. And Steve Winchell's company and your company, Bruce Everly, those guys really knew what they were doing better than we did. And I was just kind of floundering around and just kind of making it up as I went along. And if I'd hooked up with some of them, I might have had a better career.
You've had a pretty good career.
Yeah, I did it the hard way.
You've done just fine. Well, that's true. We all do that. I agree with the importance of mentors. And, even in an agency, there are some people who isolate themselves. They're working, but they're not developing their craft. And that's the key, is to get better, to make an investment in your career. And you've done that. It's
one thing that Gary Benson Benga says, that if you can just manage to get like 1% better every week through whatever means necessary, whether it's doing more reading or attending seminar or whatever, then if you can just be on a path of continuous improvement. And there's a guy who Gary admitted
he's a great writer. I read one of his letters on olive oil. I mean, it was brilliant.
Yeah,
I'm not even interested in olive oil, but it was brilliant.
I know.
He is quite good.
Gary is widely considered to be the best copywriter alive today. Now, he's been retired for about 10 years.
Well, I'd heard that, and I could see why. I was saying, wow, I don't even care about olive oil, but this is brilliant.
Oh, now, as long as we're on the subject, I will also mention something that I didn't hear of until 6 or 7 years ago, and here I am, 65 years old, okay? And yet this is what they tell people nowadays, is go find a strong control and just copy it out by hand. Don't type it.
Oh,
just copy it out by hand.
Right.
And I had never heard that advice. Never heard it. For 40 years in this business, I had never heard it. But I think it is spectacularly good advice. And because
you see each line,
you can see it forces you to slow down and stop and think, well, why did the copywriter write that, and why did he do it at that moment, and why did he use those particular words, And I think it's just wonderful advice. And so that's probably another thing that I wish I'd done, but unfortunately, and nobody shared that with me.
Right. Well, you're sharing it with other people. You do like teaching. I can tell that, because I know you may not where you make your money, but you do want to share and help others, and that's a good quality, I think.
Well, I like doing interviews like this because I like to talk about myself, and this is the only socially acceptable way to do it. If I do it at cocktail parties, people just think I'm a boring jerk. But if I do it on a podcast,
I see. I get it. Well, great. It was an honor to have you as a guest, and thank you. I hope to run into you. Always a fountain of information. And it's online. Your AWAI speech, which was very funny, and that's online. And my first 40 years in junk mail's online. You have your book. I ordered on Dice. What's it called? God Doesn't Shoot Dice.
God Doesn't Shoot Craps. Yes, it's the world's only
craps.
Only novel about a direct. Right. God Doesn't Shoot Craps. It's the only novel in the world about a junk mail writer, so it has some interest in that regard.
There you are. So anyway, you're a great resource, and
the website is just freesamplebook.com, and I should be selling something to you, but I'm not. Everything there literally is free, so just go on there and you can see all the stuff that you.
Yeah, I mean it's a bargain. It's just it's really really crazy not to go on, and again, it's not hard work. that's the beauty of it. It's it's fun to read. So I like that. Hey, I appreciate you coming on. So,
it's my pleasure,
Donor
Jim.
Doctor listeners. Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. Donor Doctor listeners, till next time. Talk to you later. Bye.